There's only one presence and one power in all the universe, the presence and power of God that is absolute, unchanging good. The second one is that God is individuated in us, and we call that the Christ. So we have this spiritual self. That's what we truly are. The third principle is the law of mind action. Not attraction, although it does work that way, but mind action. And we used to say, thoughts held in mind produce after their kind, or produce the equivalent of the thoughts held in mind. The fourth principle is daily meditation and prayer. And the fifth principle is expressing the other four principles in our everyday life. Now, of those 5 principles, which is the most important? What? Expression? The fifth one is expressing the other 5 in our everyday life. Mm-hmm. Most people, when I ask that question, say that the most important one is God. But it's not. The most important one is the third principle that says thoughts held in mind produce after their kind. And if we don't choose with our thought to connect with God, then we don't have that connection. Because God doesn't, well, I shouldn't say that. I was going to say God doesn't meddle in our life. But God does meddle in our life. And God meddles in our life when we aren't looking. Charles Fillmore's, and he was a co-founder of Unity, his favorite Bible verse was, do not conform to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, which has to do with thinking. And we do that so that we experience all the goodness that God has for us. We think 24/7 every day of our lives. Everything we do comes out of thought. When I was 4.5 years, my life changed when I was 4.5. And up until that time, my mother and dad had started a bakery. This is the Big Depression. And they started a bakery. And I spent most of my time with my grandparents. And my grandfather was wonderful. I was his favorite. He took me everywhere. And then God meddled in my life, so to speak. My brother was born. I was 4.5. I can remember sitting out on the porch with my grandfather because it was a warm summer night. We were watching for the stork. And my grandfather says, now watch. And I swear that I saw that stork. So my brother was born. 2 months after my brother was born, my grandfather died. 2 months after my grandfather died, our house burned down. And 3 months later, I discovered my dad was a violent drunk. My dad, I can remember talking to my brother, and I bent over his crib, and I said, I was here first, and she's my mother too. And I resented him then, and I think I resented him most of my life. That's part of the thought that we hold in mind. I grew up in a violent alcoholic home. My dad beat my mother. He didn't beat my brother or I, but he did my mother. He broke her ribs twice. She didn't go to the hospital. We fled to my uncle out in the country. When I was 13, she'd had enough, and she divorced him. Enough is enough. There wasn't any God in my life. I didn't even know what God was. I can remember when I was about 8, my girlfriend came over at Christmas time to look at my presents, and then I went to her house to look at her presents, and they had this crutch and this Jesus. And I'm thinking, why do they have all this Jesus junk mixed up with Christmas? Now I know. So my life changed at 13. My mother used to tell me, I won't love you if, da-da-da-da-da-da. And then when I got to be a teenager, she said to me, be a lady like me. She was raised to be a lady. She really was. She was the oldest of 5 children. Her closest brother was 17 years old when she was born. So she'd say, be a lady like me. And I'll tell you, if there's anything I didn't want to be, it was a lady like my mother. I mean, she was divorced, and she used to get beat up. And those are the core values. Brian was talking about core values today, and we used to call them basic inner convictions. And when we're from about being born until we're about 7, we learn who we are. We learn what life is like. We learn our place in it. And these become our core values. Now, my core value was there wasn't any help at that point. There wasn't any help. This is the way it was. There wasn't any help. My core value when I was with my grandfather was it's safe. After that, I wasn't safe. So those are some of the core values that I've carried through most of my life. When I was in seminary, I had an experience in one of our classes. It was a counseling class. And in the counseling class, most of my fellow students were either recovering alcoholics or recovering drug addicts. So we had this movie, and what it showed was a little girl laying in bed. There was a light under her door, and you could hear a door open and close. You could hear some talking, and then you could hear some noise, and then you could hear hitting and people shouting. I had to leave before that whole movie was done because I had lived that over and over and over. And what happened that day was it's like I had all of the thoughts, all of the memories of what happened, but I'd never dealt with the feelings. And so it felt like all of that just burst open at once. I felt better after that, after the 3 days that it took me to recover, and my responses to life were a little different. Thoughts held in mind produce after their kind. We think about thoughts, but we don't think about the feeling that goes with it. Every thought has a feeling. The thought is what gives the feeling is what gives the thought energy, and the more we think about a thought, it gathers more and more energy, and it manifests in our life and can become a core value. We used to call them basic inner convictions. When I was 20, I married my first husband. I went with him for 4 years. We were married for 2. We finally divorced, and I was a single mother and had a child who then was 4 years old. And I was thinking one day about my daughter, and something says she needs Sunday school. And I thought, well, my daughter needs Sunday school. Where'll I take her? And my aunt and uncle used to come over and talk about this thing called unity. And I would listen. And I found out they had a little group meeting in a church. And so I took my daughter. My plan, I was hungover. My plan was to take her to this group. They had the Sunday school. Take her to this group and then leave and come back. So I walked in all prepared to do this, and I introduced myself to the minister, and she says, "Oh, I know your mother. Come right in." She took my hand and pulled me in, and that's how I was introduced to Unity. I went every Sunday after that, and sometimes I'd fall asleep. Now, there's 10 or 15 people in the congregation, so you could tell when I fell asleep. One day, the minister came to me, and she said, "It's okay if you fall asleep in church, Violet. Your subconscious gets it." So I would internalize it that way. We had lived in that, or held services in that little church, and then we grew, so we had to move into a bigger place, which was an AA building, and we shared that building. And I said to her one day, "What can I do around here to help?" And she says, "You can teach Sunday school." I'd been taking classes. "You can teach Sunday school." And she gave me, my training was a stenographer's notebook. Everybody know what a stenographer's notebook looks like, full of instructions. That was my training. Fortunately, the next year I got to go to a regular training session. We didn't have the same kind of material then as we do now, and a lot of it came from our own understanding. And I discovered that I learn through teaching. That's the way I learn. And I was attending classes, and the Sunday school grew, and I grew, and I began to change. We talk about transformation a lot in Unity. And sometimes we think it happens in a twinkling. Mostly it doesn't. Mostly it doesn't. The word transformation means that when one thing, an object or an idea, comes in contact with another thing, that thing is changed at depth. So when we come in contact with this truth that there's only one presence and one power, that begins to change us within. One of the things I learned in class at that time was denials and affirmations. And by then, I was remarried. And I decided things were not going really well. And so I decided I would use denials and affirmations to fix my marriage. I did not understand what they were then. So I denied that there was any trouble in my marriage and that I had a perfect, loving marriage. And you know what? It didn't work. And it took me a long time to figure that out, that it didn't work. So after that, we moved to Kalamazoo, Michigan. I loved Kalamazoo. And this was where I really began to grow spiritually. There was no Sunday school, so I started one. The group was meeting in the basement of a bank. And the only place for Sunday school was in the stairwell. So that's where I taught Sunday school. Until we grew and we got a minister. And at that time, something was happening in my life, and I dropped out for a while. And then, about 3 years later, I kept getting a phone call from this woman, Adrienne. She called me every day for about 5 weeks to try to convince me to come back and organize the Sunday school, because they were now in a bigger place and they had kids running all over the place. So I started another Sunday school. One of the things that we did was to prove the power of love. We had bean seeds. We planted bean seeds, and we had 3 boxes. And one was the love box. And we were supposed to send all of our love to the love box. The box in the middle was the neutral. We didn't do anything to that. But the 3rd box was the anger box. And every time we got frustrated and angry, we were supposed to send that to that box. And every Sunday, because we didn't have a permanent place, I had to lug these boxes back and forth. And one day I noticed that the angry box was growing faster than the love box. So I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, what do I do? Do I switch them, relabel to prove my point? And I thought, no, I have to take it. I don't know what we're going to do with it, but I have to take it. So I took it and laid them out on the table, and this little boy came in. And he looked at the boxes, and he looked at the anger box, and he says, I knew it. I knew it would happen. And I said to him, what would happen? He says, I've been sending all my love to that box because it really needed love. And it was a wonderful lesson of how love overcomes that anger. One of the things we did in Sunday school was we had a picnic in June every year. And it was in July. And in June, we would start imagining our picnic day. And we would imagine it bright and sunny and everybody having a good time. We really get that picture all the Sunday school. And every year for 5 years, that's what we had. One year, my husband decided, since we had a sunny day every Sunday, this imagining didn't work as far as he was concerned. But it just so happened that every time we had a picnic, we had a good day. So he decided he would have his company picnic on the Saturday before our picnic. It rained. It rained. So he was really not very happy about that. So we did different things like that with the Sunday school, and we taught them about God, and their definition of God was, God is a wonderful something that knows. And what does God know? God knows who we are. God knows what is the best thing for us to do. And we discover that in prayer. They decided the second principle was that God was in us. God was in us, and we could talk to God, and we were supposed to love ourselves. When we got to thoughts held in mind, they weren't so sure about that. But we taught it anyway, and sometimes it was successful and sometimes it wasn't. We get all of our core values and belief system between the ages of 1 and 7 or 5 or 7. But as I said before, that age is when we learn who we are, we learn what the world is like, and we learn our place in it. And everything we learn at that time is, if it has energy, we hold that in mind. It becomes what I call a basic inner conviction. My basic inner conviction when I'm teaching Sunday school was, I won't love you if. That was my mother's thing. I won't love you if. And so I tried really hard to get the love of the Sunday school and the Sunday school teachers. I don't know if I succeeded or not. There I am trying to control again. But that was one of my things. And in order to be good enough, I had to be really good, really good. So that kind of propelled me through life. When I was in Kalamazoo, I really wanted to know God better. I wanted a deep relationship with God. And I thought, well, the way I learn and develop that kind of thing is through teaching. I was already teaching Sunday school, and because you have to make everything so simple for the children to understand, I had gained a great understanding, and that was going into my subconscious and working on those core values, little at a time, changing. So I wanted to have a deeper relationship with God. And I decided that because I learned best by teaching, I would teach an adult class in a classroom, a regular classroom, school classroom. And so I made this affirmation. I am a teacher of truth, ideas, and principles, and I do it in a classroom situation. And I worked with that, I don't know how long, but a long while. And Then we had a workshop at church that I got to go for free because I was the Sunday school superintendent. And it was Alpha Truth Awareness. And he talked about affirmations. Now, there's two kinds of affirmations. There's one kind of affirmation that affirms the truth in us. There's another type that helps us with goal setting and keeping our eyes in one direction. And this affirmation was to keep my eyes in that direction, build enough energy so that we would be drawn together. So, and he said to me, if you really want this to happen, you need to put some energy into it. You need some exciting words, something that's going to stir things up. And you need to put yourself in the picture. Not picture yourself in the picture, but be in the picture. So I changed my affirmation to, I am an inspiring, dynamic teacher of truth, ideas, and principles, and I do it in a classroom education situation, and everyone is blessed. Nothing happened. I had that in my wallet for 9 months, incubation. And then my friend, who was kind of my mentor, took me to a Spiritual Frontiers convention in Chicago. And the last day of the convention, we were going to a workshop about Jesus. We went on the elevator and we got off at the right floor, and I went in one direction and she went in the other. And I said, it's down here. And she said, no, it's down here. And I said, no, it's down here. So we went down and we got in the room, and they announced the title of the workshop. And it was How to Teach Parapsychology in a College Without a Degree. They told us everything to do. But I sat there and I said to her, this is the wrong workshop, and we got up and walked out. And I turned around and walked back in. So I went home and I took that affirmation and threw it out, tore it up and threw it out. And after that workshop, I put together a syllabus about what I wanted to do, and I sent it off to the public school system and the local college. And when I would drive to work, I would be teaching my class. I would see how I would respond if someone asked a question that I didn't know the answer to. I would sit on the edge of the table or the desk, not behind a desk. And I would teach that in class and in the car going to work. And at the end, that was during the summer, at the end of the summer, I had sent my syllabus and I got a call from the college. And they asked me to come in for an interview. And one of the first things he asked me is, why should we hire you to do this? I said, I don't know. So we chatted for a bit, and I left. And I got a call the following week saying, come on in. We want to talk to you about this. We're going to just do a day workshop. And you'll get paid $25 for that. And so I went and we talked about it, and 2 people showed up. I had all of my stuff in boxes. I had all kinds of stuff to use and some books I took, and I had it in beer crates because I worked at a beer company. And he came in and he looked around and he said, I'm really impressed. Let's try it again. And I wanted to teach it because it was a good hook for unity principles, and that's what I wanted to teach. So I didn't hear anything until December, and I got a contract in the mail from the college. And the contract changed my class from a workshop to a class in the psychology department. It was a credit course. I was going to teach a regular class for, I think it was 8 weeks, an 8-week class. And I taught for 5 years. So I taught about thoughts held in mind, one of the things I talked about. And I talked about God. I didn't say it was God. And I taught things like ESP, how the mind works. And I taught dream interpretation. I taught how to create energy to help in healing, hands-on healing. I taught reincarnation and dream interp. I believe in reincarnation. I know reincarnation because I've experienced it. It isn't something I've read about. I've experienced it. And so that was 5 years I did that. And then my husband and I weren't getting along. And I would usually pray during our arguments, did a lot of prayer work. And we were sitting one day, and he was just going on. It was always about money. And he was going on, and I sat there in the silence and prayed all the time. So finally he says, "What are you thinking about?" And I said, "Oh, I'm just thinking." And he said, "Well, what do you think about all this?" And I said, "Well, what do you think?" He says, "I think we ought to get a divorce." And I said, "Okay." He said, "Do you know a lawyer?" I said, "Yes." And that was how we decided to get a divorce. My kids were grown. I had decided when my youngest daughter was 14 that I would leave, but I hung out until she was 17. That was the smoothest thing we ever did together. And we maintained a friendship. But when the marriage was over, it was over. I mean, there was nothing there. And I felt like I had released the karma that had kept us together. It had dissolved. So I was talking to the dean one day, and he says to me, "What's your degree, Vi?" And I said, "I don't have one." And he says, "What are you doing teaching here?" And I said, "Nobody ever asked." So then he wanted me to go to Eastern Michigan University and do an independent studies for parapsychology and get a degree. And I thought about that. I was in the basement of the church one day, and I was talking to my minister, and he said to me, "What are you going to do now, Vi?" And I said, "I think I'll go be a unity minister." That was how I made my decision. So he started to prepare me for this experience. And I'll tell you right now, nobody can prepare you for that experience. Talk about transformation. You go in one way and you come out another. One of the things you're doing is you're changing, becoming aware of those thoughts held in mind, and begin to release them. And one of the ways we release them is to acknowledge that they're there in the first place, instead of denying them. Our thoughts are things. I'm going to say that again. Thoughts are things. They have mass. They've been measured. They have mass, and they're alive. The kids used to call them thought people, because they have a life of their own. And when you get so much truth poured into you, like you do in seminary, these thought things that are within your subconscious, these basic inner convictions that you have lived by since you were 5 years old, begin to work. And when they start to work, all of those thoughts and feelings that are not compatible come up. And they don't come up in an easy way. They come up in something we call chemicalization. And chemicalization is when you've had a period of growth, and then everything falls apart. Everything. That happens in ministerial school. And it's quick, it's not over a long time, it's quick. And that comes up, and your whole life there at school falls apart. I managed the student bookstore at that point. and people used to come in, and they called it the barefoot bookstore because I was always in my stocking feet. And my clerk and I would pray. It was time to do the books, and we would pray. Before we had people come in for UICE and retreats and stuff, it was always busy in there. And we would pray. And one day I was doing the books, and they weren't coming out so good. And I said to Thora, come on, the store, now I have to tell you, the store is filled. It is packed with customers, and it's a small store. And I said to Thora, you got to come in here, we got to pray. And she said, but the store's full. And I said, I don't care, you have to come in and shut the door, and we pray. So we're in the office, and we're praying, and we get a knock on the door. And Thora opened it, and it was a customer, and they're all lined up. And Thora said, we're praying. And the first woman said, they're praying. And it went all the way down the line, and they all prayed with us. And it really made a difference in our profits, so to speak. A lot of those profits went for scholarships for the students. But one of the things that happened to me was I lost God. I didn't believe in God. The students would come in the bookstore and talk to me, and they'd say, if you don't believe in God, what are you doing here? And I said, I can't go do it. I don't believe in God, but I can't do anything. And I said, it isn't that I can't do anything. I just can't do anything. So one day I was stacking the books, shelving the books, and this book fell out between my feet. And the name of the book was The Dark Night of the Soul. And I read it, and I identified with it. I knew that was happening, but I still didn't believe in God. So that went on for a while. And then one day I was feeling really, really sad and depressed. And it was a cold winter day, and there was snow piles around. And the village has a beautiful rose garden, just a beautiful rose garden in the summer. In the winter, it looks like a patch of thorny stem dead sticks. And I went out and I sat on the bench, and I was trying to pray, but I didn't believe in God, so that was difficult. So I sat there and I was looking at these rose bushes, and I thought, where's the rose? That rose that is so beautiful in the summer, where is it in the winter? You can slice it open. You can dig around the roots. You can look underneath it. You will not find a rose. Where is it? It's in the rose bush as potential. And that helped me to realize that the Christ is within us as potential. And it doesn't begin to expand in us until we do something about it. We start to pray, we start to affirm, we start to look at all of the things that are not congruent with what we're trying to do. Not all of them, because we never see all of them. But it's that kind of thing, and gradually I began to recognize that Christ was in us and that God was all around us, and I believed in God again. And that was when we were seeing the movie, and I broke open. So ministerial school was wonderful and awful. It's a place where you learn and grow, and you go in one way and come out the other. After while I was still in ministerial school, I went to work for the retreat department at Unity Village. And you expect the retreat department to have retreats that are introspective and quiet. Our retreats weren't like that. We had a wonderful time. Each of us on staff had our own program. Mine was Vespers and Get to Know You, and I participated on a panel. And we started our day at 7 o'clock in the morning with exercises. And we started our exercises with laughter. Now, everybody's standing out there at 7 o'clock in the morning. They're shivering because it's cool out there and talking among themselves. But we started with laughter. Now, how do you get people to laugh in that situation? Well, we would stand there and we'd say, we're going to laugh, and this is how you laugh. You start with hee, 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 and then you go ha, 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 and then you go oh, 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 and you put them all together and you laugh. And we got everybody laughing. Sounds stupid and silly, but that's the way we did it. So that was fun. It was one of the best times of my life. I also taught classes in the UICE program, which was the Unity Licensed Teacher program. And I taught the law of mind action again. And every time I do that, I grow a little, I find out different things. In seminary, I had come across Charles Fillmore's book, Atom Smashing Power of Mind. And somebody gave me a transcript of a class he taught in 1932. I still have it. But the subject of this chapter, an atom smashing mind, and the transcript talked about the fourth dimension. Thinking in the fourth dimension. And he equated it with thinking in kingdom of heaven way. He equated that with the kingdom of heaven. So I really thought about what that was and what that meant. And I looked at Jesus and how Jesus did that. And I realized that if you're thinking in the fourth dimension, there's no judgment. You don't judge anything. It's only the way things are. Nothing is right or wrong, bad or good. It only is. And what it's the only thing that we need to be aware of is that what's hurtful, harmful, helpful, or healing, rather than saying this is bad and this is good. The other thing that I learned about thinking in the fourth dimension is to re-language what we're saying. And one of the things, I still try to do that re-language. But one of the things that I really changed and still works for me now is rather than saying that's really bad, I say it's not good. Now I know it's not good or bad, but I mean, what else are you going to use? Yeah. It's a not good thing. That doesn't sound good. So that has stuck with me. But the fourth dimensional thing has really been a growing thing for me as I listened to my words and what they meant. When I was in ministry, after retreats, I went to Savannah, and then I went to Des Plaines, Illinois. A woman had just been elected to the Board of Trustees, and she decided she was going to give me some constructive criticism. You know what kind of criticism I got? She was not asked by the board to do this. This was her own idea. And she would call me inept, unacceptable. I didn't know what the heck I was doing. Everything that was not good. And it got to the point where I would see her coming down the walk and I would shudder, just shudder. One day she came in and she started and I lost it. Oh, one of the things I did was I said, why don't we sit down and pray together? And she says to me, you need prayer, I don't. So one day she came in and she started, and I lost it. I totally lost it. We had a big fight. I wasn't too happy with myself, and I got in my car and I started to drive home. And I got to a stoplight, and one of the things that I teach is think about what you're thinking about when you aren't thinking about anything, because that tells you a lot. So I stopped at the light, and all of a sudden I'd been doing why this and why that and why the other thing, and I started asking, what is this about for me, God? What is this about for me? And as I stopped at that stoplight, I realized, it just popped right there, that everything that she was saying out loud, I was telling myself about myself inside, and I didn't even know it. And when we think about what we're thinking about, when we're not thinking about anything, those things begin to come up, and we can see them and let them go. It's interesting, once I saw that and I got the message, she disappeared from the church. She left one day, and 3 years later she came back. And she walked in and she looked around and she says, I don't like to say this, but you did everything right. So it's been a journey of learning and growing and learning to think in the fourth dimension. That's the most important thing, I think. And be sure to ask the right questions. What is this about for me? Thinking in the fourth dimension. Those are the things that I've learned on my journey, and I hope they bless you too. Do we have any questions? Yeah.
You said a couple things, and I've experienced a couple things in my life where there have been these occasions of, I don't know how else to describe it, but knowing, like, boom, like that's what you're supposed to do. And one of those occasions was when I met my husband for the first time. I saw him, he was singing in the choir, and this sort of, I swear to you, it was the goofiest thing ever, but it was like this light went over his head, like, that's the guy. I didn't know his name, anything. I told my cousin who was sitting next to me in church, I go, I'm marrying that dude. She goes like, shut up. We're married. So, but, and I had a job once where I was doing very well, and I took a job at a nonprofit, just like, because it was like a lightning bolt, like, you're supposed to do that. I'm like, no, I got a good job. I'm making good money. Right. So here's the deal. I recently got a new one, and I don't like it. And I'm like, no, this is not fit with the plan. So I guess my question to you is, when it just seems so, this is not the plan, God. What are you doing? How do you get to this point where you can surrender and go, okay, it makes no freaking sense to me at all, but okay. And I'm not there, but I really want to get there because I don't like where I am right now, which is not there. That's my question.
I would ask, and I've done this a lot of times, what is this about for me? What am I learning? And write it down. You won't get the answer the first time you write. Yeah, you have to keep writing and keep writing. Because if you can just see what that is, what that's about, then it takes the energy out of the thought that's got you there. But you're there because there's something you need to know about yourself. And the sooner you get to know it. Okay.
I'm really interested in this talk about fourth dimension because I'm not too sure I understand it. And did I understand you to say one of the books of Charles Fillmore's that you read helped you think in the fourth dimension? Could you tell me what book that was? Because I've read that over and over again, and every time I read it, I think something new. Is it? Well, I've got to go back and read it again.
He doesn't really say how to do it. He just equates it with the kingdom of heaven and thinking in that consciousness. I have come to the realization that it's the kingdom of heaven. There is no right or wrong. That's my conclusion from reading that. There is no right or wrong. There is no shame. There is no blame. It just is. And if we can come to that point of isness, then we can begin to do something about it. We know how to pray. We know how to pray. Something happens and we know what to do. Comes, it's time to go to ministerial school. So that's how I got there.
Lately, I've been reading somewhere in books and magazines connected with Unity about the art of being detached. Would that be the same thing as being in the fourth dimension? You still realize what's going on in the world, and you have compassion, but it is what it is, and it isn't anything you have to grieve about. And because lately so many things happening in the world and in our world, and it can get scary. And if I can reach this state of being detached and in the world but not of it, I guess that's what Jesus meant by that. Or was it
I listen to the news because I want the information. And sometimes I would just sit there and bless it, and that helps. Yeah, that helps. When I remember. Yeah, it takes the sting out. Right. Yeah. I don't answer them. I just go, okay. Or you can just say, oh. I learned this when I took Alpha Truth Awareness. You can just say oh, because oh is 0 and it means nothing. Oh. So they can rant and rave all they want. I'll give my opinion, but usually that opinion is not accepted because it's not true for them. Well, sometimes I do anyway. Well, I used to have a lot of, I don't call them beliefs, I call them knowings, because you don't believe your name, you know your name. And we have all of these inner ideas and thoughts about the world and who we are that we know are true. So I have changed. Man, I know I've changed because I'm completely different. My ex-husband was here visiting my daughter, and I live with my daughter. And he noticed it, and he said to me, I'll never forget, he apologized for what happened in our marriage. I almost fell out of the car. But I work, my life is smoother. I feel better. My health is better. My thinking is sometimes better, not all the time. I don't worry. I don't worry. My ego gets in the way sometimes, and I recognize that. But not all the time. It's not that important. I know I work at the idea that God is my source, and I'm always amazed at how that happens. I said that I worked at a beer company, and the beer company was Imperial Beverage, and I was told by my husband I had to go to work. So I'd called a few places and applied a few places, and it wasn't working out. And I knew where Imperial Beverage was, so I'm driving down the street one day, and I thought, well, I'll go look at it. Just go see what's there. And I walked in. We'd been in Kalamazoo for 3 months. I didn't know anybody except the people across the street. So they asked me for references. I didn't have any references. So I told him that, and he says, well, how long have you been here? And I told him, he says, what about one of your neighbors? And I said, oh, And so I gave him the name of one of our neighbors. He knew this guy. He knew this guy. And this guy, who didn't really know me, gave me a wonderful reference. So I started there, and I was part-time. And then I needed to go to work full-time. And I worked part-time 2 years. And when I started full-time, they invested me fully for 1 year's pension. So I worked there for 10 years. And when I quit to go to ministerial school, that's what paid my tuition. You know, that's the kind of thing that happens when you begin to change. You know that God is your source. That doesn't answer anything. That's the best I can do. Did you want to ask something?
Yeah, thank you. You have said that there are some stories which are very interesting. For the background spiritually, spiritually, your background, how was being formed while you didn't believe God at a past time? How was now mentioning to believe God? How was focusing?
How did I learn to believe in God?
Yeah.
Because God said. That's it. God said. Oh, okay. There is, I call some things God said, because a God said is when God meddles in your life and you're not looking. And that's how I got to my daughter to Sunday school. The idea just came into my head, she needs Sunday school. Okay, so it helps, prayer helps, and practicing prayer. But does that answer your question? Okay.
I wanted to come up with, is it now the Sunday school is the prefield of Christianity or
Sunday school?
yeah.
What? Well, Unity is Christian, so the Sunday school is Christian, but our Christian is different than other denominations. That's the only thing I can say. We believe in Jesus Christ. Some of us believe he was the actual Son of God. Some of us believe that he's our older brother, our way shower, and he shows us how to live. So, but we are Christian. Okay. Well, yeah. He lived his spiritual nature fully. Everybody has their in interpretation of how things are. And some Christian religions believe that Jesus is the Son of God, that he expressed that. But we're all sons of God. We all have that within us, that same potential that he expressed fully. So, and I think one of the things that works for me is God is everywhere present. God is not a person. But it's hard to wrap your mind around that. And if we can personalize God in a person like Jesus, then we have something that we can see in our minds and pray to, knowing that that is our way of relating with God. And our Christian brothers and sisters, as far as I can tell, do that. They have personalized God in Jesus, and that's the way they believe, and it works for them. It works for them.
I hope that people who are still having questions will come to your class on and metaphysical interpretation of the Bible, because those classes are what did it for me. When I could read all that beautiful stuff in the Bible, and some of it, if you take literally, absolutely has you tearing your hair out. But if you interpret it metaphysically, it works every time, and it's beautiful.
You don't just transform without doing anything. You have to practice. You have to practice your prayers. You have to practice thinking in the fourth dimension or kingdom of heaven thinking. You have to nourish your soul. And it's not easy because we always want to conform to the norm. What's normal out here? What are people, if I transform, one of the questions that we don't acknowledge that's in our mind is, how am I going to be if I transform? Who will I be? What'll I be? So, it is almost 20 after 12. So if you have any questions afterward, I'll be here for a few minutes and you can ask those, okay? So let's close with a moment of prayer. Oh, wonderful God, we thank you for your presence here, that you bless us and bless this spiritual community, and in turn, we bless the larger community. And we know, God, that as we go forward from this place, that you go with us and before us, that you guide us in all we do, and all is well. Thank you, God.
Life is for living. Whatever you will live for, you will give. Life is for giving. Whatever you will give to life will live. Life is for doing, for living, giving, doing, learning how. Life is for you, and life is for me. Life is for living now. Life is for loving. Whatever you will love, enough is yours. Life is for sharing. Whatever you will share with others grows. Life is for being, for loving, sharing, being, learning how. Life is for you, and life is for me. Life is for living now. Life is for living. Whatever you will live for, you will give. Life is for giving. Whatever you will give to life will live. Life is for doing, for living, giving, doing, learning how. Life is for you, and life is for me. Life is for living now.